The medical frigate Sanctuary drifted through the void between star systems, its white hull gleaming under the distant light of twin suns. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's transparent aluminum window, watching the stars slowly wheel past. After 18 months serving with the Galactic Medical Corps, she still found the sight breathtaking. "Another quiet shift," muttered nurse practitioner James Chen from behind her, reviewing patient charts on his tablet. 3 routine checkups, 1 minor burn treatment, and a Vorthon with space sickness. Sometimes I wonder why they even need humans on these missions. Elena turned from the window, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. Because humans are the only species crazy enough to run toward danger instead of away from it, she replied with a slight smile. The Galactic Council didn't assign us to medical ships because we're the best doctors. They assigned us because we're the only ones willing to fly into war zones to save lives. The Sanctuary was one of dozens of medical vessels operating under the Terran Medical Initiative, a program established after humanity joined the Galactic Federation 5 years ago. While most species contributed to the Alliance through military might, technological advancement, or resource extraction, humans had found their niche in emergency medicine and disaster response. What other species considered suicidal bravery, humans simply called doing the job. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Yuki Tanaka's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "All medical staff to stations. We've received a distress signal from the Kepler 442 system. Orbital mining platform Prosperity has suffered catastrophic structural failure. Estimated casualties in the hundreds." Elena and James exchanged glances. The Kepler 442 system sat on the edge of contested space, where the Galactic Federation's borders met those of the aggressive hegemony of Scar. Flying into that region meant risking encounter with Scar patrol fleets, notorious for their shoot-first policies. Minutes later, the medical team gathered in the main briefing room. Dr. Tanaka, a veteran of the siege of Altair Prime, stood before a holographic display showing the mining platform's last known position. Her scarred hands gestured at the tactical readout as she spoke. "The Prosperity was extracting rare minerals from an asteroid field when seismic charges destabilized the structure. Half the station is gone. The other half is venting atmosphere. We have maybe 6 hours before life support fails completely." She paused, her expression grave. "Intelligence reports indicate Scar vessels in the area. Command has cleared us to proceed, but we're going in alone." Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenobiologist, raised his hand. "What about the Vorthon rescue ships? They're closer to Kepler 442 than we are." "The Vorthon High Command has declared the region too dangerous for their vessels," Tanaka replied. "They're waiting for Federation battleships to secure the area first. That could take days." "Days those miners don't have," Elena said quietly. "Exactly." Tanaka's eyes swept the room. "We launch in 30 minutes. Standard emergency protocols are in effect. We get in, extract the wounded, and get out. Questions?" Silence filled the briefing room. Elena felt the familiar knot of anticipation forming in her stomach. This was why she'd volunteered for deep space medical service, leaving behind a comfortable practice on Earth. Out here, in the darkness between worlds, human medicine could make a difference that rippled across entire star systems. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. Elena checked and rechecked her emergency medical kit, ensuring she had sufficient trauma supplies for multiple species. The Sanctuary carried medical databases for over 300 different alien physiologies, but experience had taught her that field medicine often came down to basic principles: stop the bleeding, maintain breathing, prevent shock. Navigation Officer Lieutenant Sarah Kim's voice echoed through the ship as they dropped out of hyperspace. "Entering Kepler 442 system. Mining platform visual confirmed. Bearing 27 Mark IV. Elena joined the other medical staff on the observation deck, watching as the Prosperity resolved from a distant point of light into a twisted wreck of metal and composite materials. The mining platform had been built into a massive asteroid, its industrial superstructure now fractured and bleeding atmosphere into space. Emergency lights flickered along the remaining intact sections, and Elena could see escape pods drifting away from the wreckage like seeds scattered by the wind. "My God," James whispered. "How many people were on that thing?" "Manifest shows 843 crew members," came Tanaka's voice over the intercom. "Mixed species, mostly Terran and Kepler colonists, but also Vorthon miners and crystalline engineers." The sanctuary moved closer to the disaster site, its medical bay teams preparing to receive casualties. Elena watched rescue shuttles launching from their ship's hangar bay, racing toward the escape pods scattered throughout the asteroid field. Each shuttle was piloted by human crew members, the only species willing to navigate the treacherous debris field at the speeds necessary to reach survivors before their limited life support failed. "Dr. Vasquez to Shuttle Bay 7, came a voice over her personal communicator. "We need you on the next rescue run." Elena made her way through the ship's corridors, passing crew members rushing to their emergency stations. The sanctuary had been designed by human engineers with human psychology in mind. Where other species built medical vessels with comfort and efficiency as primary considerations, humans prioritized rapid response and operational flexibility. The ship's corridors were wider than necessary to allow for emergency evacuations. Its medical bays could be rapidly reconfigured for different species requirements, and its shuttle bays were positioned for maximum speed in deployment. Shuttle pilot Captain Maria Santos greeted Elena at the airlock. "Doc, we've got a situation developing. 3 escape pods with life support failing, but they're deep in the debris field. Gonna be some fancy flying to reach them in time." Elena strapped herself into the shuttle's medical station as Santos fired up the engines. Through the viewport, she could see the twisted remains of the mining platform growing larger as they approached. Chunks of metal and ice tumbled through space around them, some pieces large enough to destroy the shuttle if they collided. "First pod coming up on sensors," Santos reported, her hands dancing over the flight controls. "I'm reading 7 life signs, but their beacon indicates hull breach." The shuttle wove between drifting debris, Santos's enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate gaps that would have challenged even the most advanced automated systems. Elena prepared her emergency medical kit, knowing that whatever waited in that escape pod would require immediate intervention. They found the first pod wedged against a chunk of processed ore, its hull cracked but intact. Santos maneuvered the shuttle's docking tube into position, while Elena prepared for rapid decompression procedures. The pod's emergency hatch cycled open, revealing 7 injured miners in various states of distress. Kepler colonists, Elena identified, recognizing their distinctive physiological adaptations to high-gravity worlds. 2 with obvious fractures, 1 unconscious, possible internal bleeding on the others. She worked quickly, applying trauma patches and administering emergency medications while Santos prepared to move to the next pod. Kepler colonists were tough, their dense bone structure and redundant organ systems making them more resilient than baseline humans, but they were still vulnerable to decompression injuries and blunt force trauma. "Pod secured. Moving to coordinates for Rescue 2, Santos reported. As they flew toward the next group of survivors, Elena's communicator crackled with an urgent transmission from the sanctuary. "All shuttles, be advised. Long-range sensors are detecting incoming vessels. Configuration unknown, but approach vector suggests hostile intent." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Out here in contested space, unknown vessels usually meant one thing: Scar Raiders. The aggressive reptilian species had been expanding their territory for decades, viewing the Federation's humanitarian missions as signs of weakness to be exploited. "Santos," How long until we complete the rescue? Elena asked. 15 minutes to collect the remaining pods, another 10 to get back to the sanctuary, Santos replied, her voice steady despite the implications. We can do this, Doc. Just need to trust in humans stubborn. The second escape pod held a mix of species. 3 Vorthan engineers with their distinctive crystalline exoskeletons, 2 baseline humans, and a crystalline being whose silicon-based physiology required completely different medical protocols. Elena worked to stabilize the most critical cases, while Santos pushed the shuttle's engines beyond their recommended limits. "Third pod in sight," Santos called out, "but we've got company." Through the viewport, Elena could see sleek, dark shapes moving against the star field. Scar patrol vessels, their predatory designs unmistakable even at this distance. She'd heard the stories from other medical personnel who'd encountered Scar raiders before. The reptilian species viewed mercy as weakness and had no concept of medical neutrality. To them, a medical ship was simply an easier target. "Sanctuary to all shuttles," came Dr. Tanaka's voice over the emergency channel. "Continue rescue operations. We are not abandoning survivors." Elena smiled grimly as she worked on an unconscious Vorthan engineer. This was quintessentially human behavior, refusing to abandon those in need, regardless of personal risk. Other species called it irrational, but Elena knew better. It was this very irrationality that made humans effective in emergency medicine. When logic suggested retreat, humans pushed forward. The final escape pod contained 12 survivors, more than the shuttle was designed to carry. Santos made rapid calculations while Elena triaged the most critical cases. "We're overweight, but the engines can handle it if we take it slow." "Slow might not be an option," Elena replied, watching the Scar vessels grow larger on the tactical display. "They're moving to intercept the sanctuary." Santos fired the shuttle's engines, beginning their race back to the medical frigate. Behind them, the last 2 rescue shuttles were also departing the disaster site, their holds filled with survivors. Elena continued working on the wounded, knowing that every minute of treatment now could mean the difference between life and death later. The sanctuary appeared ahead of them, its white hull now marked with red emergency lighting. Elena could see the ship's defensive systems coming online, though medical vessels carried only minimal armament. Their protection was supposed to come from their neutral status under galactic law, but the Scar hegemony had never been particularly concerned with legal niceties. "All shuttles, emergency docking procedures in effect," came the traffic control officer's voice. "We have incoming missiles." Elena looked up from her patients to see bright streaks of light racing across the starfield toward their ship. The Scar attack had begun in earnest, and the sanctuary was about to discover just how far humanity would go to protect those under their care. Santos brought the shuttle into the docking bay with practiced skill, even as the ship shuddered under the impact of enemy weapons. Elena heard the distinctive whine of the sanctuary's defensive systems returning fire, and she knew that the real test was just beginning. As medical teams rushed to evacuate the rescued survivors, Elena caught a glimpse of the main tactical display. 6 Scar vessels surrounded the medical frigate, their weapons blazing. The sanctuary was outnumbered and outgunned, carrying only enough armament to discourage pirates and raiders. Against a determined Scar attack force, their chances looked grim. But Elena had learned something during her time serving with humans in deep space. They had a tendency to redefine the meaning of impossible. As she helped rush the wounded toward the medical bays, she could hear Captain Reynolds' voice over the ship's communication system, calm and determined. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack by Scar forces while conducting lawful medical operations. We will not abandon our patients, and we will not surrender. All crew to emergency stations. Let's show these raiders what happens when you threaten a human medical ship." Elena smiled as she began treating the most critically wounded survivors. The Scar had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that a medical vessel would be an easy target, crewed by pacifist healers who would surrender rather than fight. They had failed to understand that human medical personnel were still human, and humans had a very specific response to bullies who threatened the helpless. The sanctuary might be outnumbered, but it was crewed by the same species that had once fought off saber-toothed tigers with pointed sticks and considered charging into machine gun fire a viable military tactic. The Scar were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy had a saying, "Never corner a human, never threaten what they're protecting, and never, ever strike a Deathworlder medical ship." As the battle raged around them, Elena worked to save lives, knowing that every patient she stabilized was a victory against the forces that would turn the galaxy into a darker, crueler place. The real fight was just beginning. The sanctuary shook violently as another Scar plasma torpedo found its mark, the lights flickering momentarily before emergency power kicked in. Dr. Elena Vasquez maintained her grip on the surgical laser, not allowing the ship's movement to affect her delicate work on a crystalline survivor whose silicon-based circulatory system had been damaged in the mining platform collapse. "Hull breach on Deck 7, came the damage control report over the intercom. "Emergency bulkheads sealed." Elena's hands remained steady despite the chaos around her. The medical bay had been designed by human engineers who understood that trauma surgery couldn't stop just because the ship was under attack. Magnetic clamps held her instruments in place, the operating table had built-in stabilizers, and the surgical lights were hardened against power fluctuations. "Dr. Vasquez," called Nurse Chen from across the medical bay. "We're getting reports that the Scar are demanding our surrender. They want us to turn over all survivors from the mining platform." Elena looked up from her patient, her expression hardening. "They want to interrogate survivors from a civilian mining operation?" "Intelligence suggests the Prosperity was extracting materials needed for advanced Federation shield generators," Chen replied while treating a Vorthan engineer for decompression sickness. "The Scar probably think they can extract strategic information." "Over my dead body," Elena muttered, returning to her work. The crystalline being's life signs were stabilizing, but she needed another 30 minutes to complete the necessary repairs to its damaged neural pathways. Captain Reynolds's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, calm and professional despite the circumstances. "All medical staff, this is the bridge. We are not surrendering our patients to hostile forces. Continue normal operations. We will handle the military situation." Elena had served with Captain Reynolds for over a year, and she knew the woman's reputation. Sarah Reynolds had earned her command during the Proxima Centauri incident, where she'd held off 3 pirate vessels long enough for evacuation ships to escape with 2,000 civilian refugees. She was exactly the kind of officer you wanted commanding a medical vessel in hostile territory. The ship's defensive weaponry fired again, the distinctive whine of human-manufactured plasma cannons echoing through the hull. The sanctuary wasn't a warship, but its defensive systems had been designed with human tactical doctrine in mind. Hit hard, move fast, and never give up. "Incoming transmission from the Scar flagship," announced Communications Officer Lieutenant Torres. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The main medical bay's display screens activated, showing the bridge of a Scar warship. The alien vessel's commander was a massive reptilian being, its scales dark green and scarred from what were probably ritual combat marks. When it spoke, its voice was a harsh rasp that the translation software struggled to render properly. "Human vessel, you carry information valuable to the Scar hegemony. Surrender your rescued primitives, and we will allow your escape. Refuse, and we will take them from your wreckage." Captain Reynolds's response was immediate and typically human. "Scar Commander, This is Captain Sarah Reynolds of the Terran Medical Corps vessel Sanctuary. You are attacking a clearly marked medical ship operating under galactic law. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The SCAR commander's laugh was like grinding metal. Consequences? You are 6 small ships against 1 medical transport. Your Federation friends are days away. What consequences could you possibly threaten? Elena smiled grimly as she worked. The SCAR commander was about to learn a fundamental truth about humans. They rarely made threats they couldn't back up. Reynolds's voice remained calm, almost conversational. Commander, you've made 2 critical errors. First, you assumed we'd abandon our patients to save ourselves. Second, you assumed a human medical ship travels alone. Elena looked up from her patient as she realized what the captain meant. The sanctuary was part of a humanitarian mission, but this was contested space. Military protocol would have required. The ship's sensors suddenly lit up with new contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Elena's heart leaped as she recognized the energy signatures on the tactical display. 3 Federation destroyers, 2 human cruisers, and a Terran assault carrier. The cavalry had arrived. SCAR vessels. This is Commodore Jackson Hayes aboard the Federation starship Intrepid, came a new voice over the communication channel. You are engaged in hostile action against a medical vessel operating under galactic law. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded for war crimes violations. Elena had heard of Commodore Hayes. He was a legend in the Terran Space Navy, known for his aggressive tactics and absolute refusal to negotiate with pirates and raiders. The man had spent his entire career hunting down slavers and war criminals across the outer systems. The SCAR commander's confident demeanor evaporated as his sensor operators reported the incoming Federation fleet. What had looked like an easy target was suddenly surrounded by some of the most advanced warships in known space. This is not over, humans, the SCAR commander snarled. The hegemony remembers insults. Good, Hayes replied cheerfully. That'll save us time explaining who we are when we come for you next. The SCAR vessels began withdrawing, their weapons powering down as they recognized the hopelessness of their position. Elena watched them retreat on the medical bay's tactical displays, feeling a familiar surge of pride in human military efficiency. The Federation fleet had appeared exactly when needed, neither too early nor too late. All medical personnel, this is Captain Reynolds, came the announcement. Threat condition has been reduced to yellow. Continue patient care operations. Well done, everyone. Elena returned her full attention to the crystalline survivor, whose complex physiology was finally stabilizing under her care. Around the medical bay, the human staff continued their work with the practiced calm of professionals who knew their job was too important to be interrupted by mere combat. Dr. Vasquez called Dr. Tanaka from the main treatment area. We're receiving additional casualties from the fleet action. Apparently one of our destroyers took some damage during the opening engagement. Elena finished sealing the crystalline's neural pathways and moved to assist with the new arrivals. Federation military personnel began arriving via emergency transport, most suffering from minor injuries sustained when their ship's inertial compensators failed during an evasive maneuver. Among the new patients was a young Vorton officer whose crystalline exoskeleton showed stress fractures from the violent acceleration. Elena began treatment while the officer attempted to explain what had happened. We detected the SCAR attack on long-range sensors, the Vorton explained, his translated voice showing signs of strain. Commodore Hayes ordered immediate acceleration to maximum speed. We reached the battle zone in half the normal time, but the stress nearly shattered my carapace. Elena worked carefully to stabilize the microfractures in the officer's protective shell. How did you know to come here? The sanctuary only sent out a general distress signal. Human protocol, the officer replied. When a Terran medical ship reports hostile contact, every available military vessel responds immediately. It is automatic. No questions asked, no political considerations. If humans are protecting the wounded, the fleet protects the humans. Elena paused in her work, struck by the simple logic of it. Across the galaxy, dozens of species contributed to the Federation's collective defense in different ways. Some provided advanced technology, others offered tactical expertise or resource extraction capabilities. But humans had carved out their own unique niche. They were the ones who ran toward danger to help others, and in return, the entire Federation military apparatus would move mountains to protect them. It is an interesting arrangement, the Vorthan continued. Other species see human medical personnel as reckless for entering dangerous situations. But the recklessness is precisely why you are so valuable. You go where others will not. Elena resumed her work on the officer's carapace, using a specialized ceramic polymer to reinforce the damaged areas. Someone has to, she said simply. Over the next several hours, the medical crisis gradually resolved. The survivors from the mining platform were stabilized and transferred to the Federation fleet for transport to proper medical facilities. The sanctuary's own damage was repaired by engineering teams from the assault carrier. The Scar had retreated beyond sensor range, but long-range reconnaissance indicated they were massing for a larger operation elsewhere. Elena found herself in the ship's observation lounge as the crisis wound down, watching the Federation fleet preparing to escort them out of the contested zone. The sight was impressive. Sleek destroyers and massive cruisers arranged in a protective formation around the small medical frigate, their weapons trained outward against potential threats. "Quite a show," said Captain Reynolds, joining Elena at the observation window. The captain looked tired but satisfied, the kind of exhaustion that came from a job well done under difficult circumstances. The Scar commander seemed genuinely surprised by our response, Elena observed. Do they really not understand how human medical operations work? Reynolds smiled grimly. The Scar see mercy as weakness, cooperation as stupidity. They can't comprehend a species that would risk military assets to protect medical personnel or medical personnel who would risk their lives to save strangers. Makes them predictable in their own way? Elena replied. Exactly. They expect everyone else to think like them. Selfish, short-sighted, brutal. When they encounter species that operate on different principles, they don't know how to respond. Reynolds gestured at the Federation fleet surrounding them. Today, they learned that attacking human medical operations comes with consequences. Elena nodded, watching one of the destroyers execute a perfect formation turn. Dr. Tanaka mentioned that we'll be reassigned to a different sector after this incident. The Kepler 442 system will be getting a permanent Federation garrison, Reynolds confirmed. The mining operations are too important to leave undefended, but there are plenty of other places that need medical support in dangerous areas. The Rigel Nebula colonies? Among others. The frontier never stops expanding, and there are always accidents, disasters, and conflicts that require medical intervention. As long as humans are willing to fly into danger zones, there will be work for ships like the Sanctuary. Elena turned from the observation window, feeling the familiar anticipation that came with preparing for a new assignment. When do we ship out? 72 hours for resupply and crew rotation. Half the medical staff will be rotating back to Earth for leave and advanced training. We'll be getting some fresh personnel, including a new xenobiologist who specializes in silicon-based life forms. Elena smiled, thinking about the crystalline survivor she'd treated earlier. That should be useful for future operations. As she made her way back to the medical bay to check on her patients, Elena reflected on the day's events. The Scar attack had been repelled, the survivors had been saved, and the Federation had demonstrated once again that attacks on medical personnel would not be tolerated. It was a good outcome, but she knew it was just one small victory in a much larger struggle. Across the galaxy, conflicts raged between dozens of species over resources. territory, and ideology. The Federation tried to maintain peace through diplomacy and mutual cooperation, but there were always groups like the Scar hegemony that preferred violence to negotiation. In that environment, medical personnel became frontline participants in a different kind of warfare, the battle to preserve civilization itself. Elena had chosen this assignment because she believed in that battle. Every life saved, every disaster response, every medical evacuation was a small victory against the forces that would drag the galaxy back into barbarism. The Scar might never understand why humans risked their lives for strangers, but that misunderstanding was part of what made humanity effective in this role. As she entered the medical bay to begin her evening rounds, Elena felt the sanctuary adjusting course for the journey back to Federation space. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new emergencies, and new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, she was content, knowing that everyone under her care would live to see another day. The Scar had learned an important lesson today, but Elena suspected it wouldn't be the last time someone made the mistake of threatening a human medical ship. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there would always be predators who saw mercy as weakness. They would learn, eventually, that they were wrong. 3 months after the Kepler 442 incident, Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself standing in the briefing room of the medical frigate Sanctuary, studying a holographic map of the Rigel Nebula. The swirling clouds of ionized gas created beautiful displays across the spectrum, but Elena knew that beauty came with deadly challenges for anyone trying to navigate the region. 17 colonial outposts scattered across 12 star systems, Dr. Tanaka explained to the assembled medical staff. Most are mining operations or research stations, but there are also 3 agricultural worlds trying to establish sustainable colonies. The nebula's radiation makes conventional communication difficult, so these people are often cut off from outside help for weeks at a time. Elena studied the positions marked on the hologram. The colonies were spread across an enormous volume of space, connected only by a handful of navigable routes through the nebula's worst radiation zones. It would take the Sanctuary days to reach some of the more remote settlements, even at maximum speed. "What's our primary mission focus?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's new xenobiologist. Webb was a specialist in silicon-based life forms, recruited after the successful treatment of crystalline survivors from the mining platform disaster. "Medical support and emergency response," Tanaka replied. "These colonies are too small to maintain full medical facilities, but they're doing dangerous work in a hostile environment. Industrial accidents, equipment failures, radiation exposure, hostile wildlife encounters, plus the usual challenges of frontier medicine." Elena nodded, remembering her own early experiences treating patients on frontier worlds. Colonial medicine was different from shipboard emergency care. Out there, you were often the only doctor for light years in any direction, working with limited supplies and no possibility of evacuation to advanced medical facilities. "What about security concerns?" asked Nurse Chen. "The Rigel Nebula is pretty far from Federation patrol routes." Captain Reynolds entered the briefing room as Chen asked his question. "Security is definitely a concern," she confirmed. "The nebula's communication difficulties make it attractive to smugglers and raiders. Plus, we have reports of increased Scar activity in the region. They seem to be probing Federation defenses, looking for weaknesses." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest at the mention of the Scar. The reptilian species had not forgotten their humiliation at Kepler 442, and intelligence reports suggested they were planning some kind of retaliation against Federation medical operations. "However," Reynolds continued, "the nebula's navigation hazards work in our favor too. Large fleet movements are almost impossible, and raiders can't operate in groups the way they prefer. We'll be escorted by the destroyer Vigilant for the initial transit, but after that, we'll be on our own." Tanaka gestured at the holographic display, highlighting several colonies in red. These outposts haven't reported in for over 2 weeks. Could be communication problems, could be equipment failure, could be something worse. Our first priority is checking on these silent stations and providing whatever assistance they need. Elena studied the red markers on the map. 3 mining operations, 2 research stations, and 1 agricultural colony, all located in the deepest parts of the nebula, where radiation levels made long-range scanning impossible. Estimated time to reach the first station? Elena asked. 36 hours, Reynolds replied. The route through the nebula requires careful navigation to avoid radiation hotspots and gravitational anomalies. The Vigilant will escort us as far as the nebula's edge, but after that we're flying solo. The next day and a half passed quietly as the sanctuary made its way toward the Rigel Nebula. Elena spent the time reviewing colonial medicine protocols and checking her equipment. Frontier medical work required different tools and techniques than shipboard emergency care. Out in the colonies, you might need to perform surgery using improvised equipment or treat alien physiologies you'd never encountered before. Elena also found time to review the personnel files of the colonies they'd be visiting. The frontier attracted a unique type of person, adventurous enough to risk everything on an unknown world, but practical enough to survive in hostile environments. Many were refugees from various conflicts. Others were scientists pursuing research that required isolation, and some were simply restless spirits looking for something new. As they approached the nebula's edge, Elena joined Captain Reynolds on the bridge to watch their transition into the ionized gas clouds. The Vigilant took up position alongside them, the destroyer's sleek hull barely visible against the brilliant backdrop of the nebula's glowing gases. "Sanctuary. This is Commander Walsh aboard Vigilant," came the transmission from their escort. "We'll be turning back here. Safe travels and don't hesitate to call for backup if you run into trouble." "Understood, Vigilant," Reynolds replied. "See you on the flip side." Elena watched the destroyer bank away and disappear into the swirling gases, leaving the sanctuary alone in one of the most hostile regions of known space. The nebula's radiation played havoc with their sensors, creating false readings and phantom contacts. Navigation required constant attention, with helm officers manually plotting courses around radiation hotspots and gravitational anomalies. Their first destination was the mining station New Prosperity, a small operation extracting rare metals from an asteroid field deep within the nebula. The station had gone silent 12 days earlier, just after reporting a successful strike of valuable ore deposits. "Approaching New Prosperity," announced Navigation Officer Kim after 18 hours of careful flying through the nebula. "I'm reading minimal energy signatures. Looks like they're running on emergency power only." Elena joined the bridge crew at the observation windows as the mining station came into view. New Prosperity was built into a large asteroid, its industrial structures extending like mechanical growths from the rock face. Most of the external lights were dark, and she could see debris floating in space around the facility. "No response to our hails," reported Communications Officer Torres. "But I'm detecting life signs, maybe 40 or 50 people, concentrated in the main habitat module." Captain Reynolds made the decision Elena expected. "Prepare an away team, full emergency medical kit, and scan for environmental hazards before we go aboard." Elena gathered her equipment and joined the away team in Shuttle Bay 2. The team included herself, Nurse Chen, Dr. Webb, and a security detail led by Lieutenant Commander Park. As their shuttle approached the mining station's docking bay, Elena could see the damage more clearly. Something had torn through the facility's outer structures, leaving twisted metal and severed power conduits in its wake. "Looks like they had some kind of industrial accident," Chen observed as their shuttle touched down in the station's emergency landing bay. Elena checked her environmental scanner as they prepared to disembark. Atmosphere is breathable but showing elevated radiation levels. Whatever happened here, it involved their main reactor. The station's corridors were dimly lit by emergency lighting, and Elena could hear the low hum of backup power systems struggling to maintain life support. They followed the life sign readings toward the main habitat module, passing through areas where bulkheads had been sealed to contain radiation leaks. They found the survivors huddled in the station's central community area, a large space that normally served as a recreation center and meeting hall. 43 colonists, mostly human but with a few Kepler-adapted workers and one Vorthon engineer, all showing signs of radiation exposure and exhaustion. "Thank God," gasped the station manager. A weathered woman named Sarah Kim, who Elena recognized from the personnel files. "We've been trying to signal for help for days, but our main transmitter was destroyed in the accident." Elena immediately began triage procedures while Chen and Dr. Webb set up treatment stations. "What happened here?" Elena asked as she examined Kim for radiation poisoning symptoms. "Mining accident," Kim explained, wincing as Elena drew blood for analysis. "We hit a pocket of unstable isotopes 3 weeks ago. Thought we had it contained, but the containment field failed catastrophically. Took out half our power grid and contaminated the outer sections of the station." Elena nodded, comparing Kim's symptoms to her scanner readings. Moderate radiation exposure, treatable with the medical supplies they'd brought. "Why didn't you evacuate to the emergency shelters?" "We did, initially, but the radiation kept spreading. We had to retreat to the central module and seal it off. We've been living on emergency rations and recycled air for 12 days. Dr. Webb approached with his scanner readings of the Vorthon engineer. "Doctor, this patient is showing signs of severe crystalline matrix disruption. The radiation has interfered with his exoskeleton's natural repair mechanisms." Elena moved to examine the Vorthon, whose normally translucent carapace was showing dark stress patterns throughout its structure. This was beyond her expertise, but Webb had specialized training in exotic physiologies. "Can you stabilize him?" Elena asked. Webb nodded, pulling out specialized equipment from his kit. "I'll need to inject synthetic repair enzymes directly into his matrix structure. It's delicate work, but he should recover fully with proper treatment." Elena continued working through the other survivors, finding most suffered from varying degrees of radiation exposure. The Kepler colonists were naturally more resistant due to their high-gravity adaptations, but even they showed signs of cellular damage from prolonged exposure. "Dr. Vasquez," called Lieutenant Commander Park from near the habitat module's main entrance. "We've got a problem. Our shuttle's picking up new contacts on long-range sensors. 3 ships, configuration unknown, approaching our position." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Unknown ships in this region usually meant raiders or smugglers, neither of which would be pleased to find Federation medical personnel interfering with potential targets. Captain Reynolds's voice crackled over Elena's communicator. "Away team, return to shuttle immediately. We have incoming bogies and I want you back aboard before they arrive." Elena looked around the crowded habitat module at the 43 survivors who needed immediate medical attention. The sickest patients required hours of treatment, and moving them in their current condition could be fatal. "Captain, we have critically injured patients here. Moving them now could kill them." "Doctor, we may not have a choice. These contacts are approaching at high speed, and their energy signatures match Scar Raider configurations." Elena exchanged glances with Chen and Dr. Webb. They all understood the implications. Scar Raiders had no respect for medical neutrality, and they'd shown particular hostility toward human operations since the Kepler 442 incident. "How long until they reach us?" Elena asked. 20 minutes at current approach speed," came Park's report from his position near the entrance. Elena made a decision that felt entirely natural, even though she knew it was tactically insane. "Chen, Webb, continue treating patients. Park, get back to the sanctuary and tell Captain Reynolds we're staying with our patients." Park stared at her. Doctor, that's not tactically sound. We need to evacuate. These people will die if we move them now, Elena replied firmly. And they'll definitely die if we abandon them to Scar Raiders. We stay. Chen looked up from treating a badly irradiated miner. Elena's right. We didn't come out here to abandon patients when things get dangerous. Dr. Webb nodded agreement, his attention focused on the complex procedure he was performing on the Vorthan engineer. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't have an escape clause for hostile contacts. Park hesitated for a moment, then activated his communicator. Captain, medical team is remaining with patients. Request immediate support. Reynolds' response was immediate and typically human. Understood. All patients and medical personnel will be defended. Hold your position. Elena smiled as she continued working. She'd served with Captain Reynolds long enough to know what that meant. The sanctuary would not abandon them, regardless of the odds. It was the same stubborn determination that had brought humanity to the attention of the broader galaxy in the first place. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Sarah Reynolds of the Federation Medical Vessel Sanctuary, came the broadcast over the station's emergency communication system. You are approaching a medical emergency operation. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came back in the harsh, grinding tones of SCAR military communications. Human medical ship, you trespass in hegemony territory. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Elena paused in her treatment of an unconscious miner to listen to Reynolds' response. SCAR Commander, this station is located in Federation space, and we are conducting lawful medical operations. You are the ones trespassing. Federation claims mean nothing here, human. This region belongs to the SCAR. You have 1 minute to begin withdrawal. Elena could hear the distant whine of the sanctuary's defensive systems powering up. 1 medical frigate against 3 SCAR raiders. The odds were not encouraging, but Elena had learned not to bet against human determination when lives were at stake. All survivors, emergency shelter positions, Elena called out, helping the mobile patients move to the most protected area of the habitat module. This might get rough. As the first exchange of weapons fire echoed through the station's hull, Elena continued her work, knowing that every patient she saved was a victory against the forces that would turn the galaxy into a hunting ground for predators. The SCAR might have superior numbers, but they had made the same mistake as their comrades at Kepler 442. They had threatened a human medical operation, and humans had very specific ideas about how to respond to such threats.